Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and to a new video. So many of you asked me to make again a monthly install of Arch, this time using line by line the commands to install it. And so this is what I'm going to do in this video. Now if you want to install Arch from scratch line by line, it's definitely a great way not only to install Arch, but also to learn the basics of Linux, like for example, partitioning your disk, formatting your partition, mounting the partitions, creating new user. All of these tasks are actually basics for Linux, and they're going to be found also in many Linux certifications. So it's not only a great way to install Arch, it's also a great way to learn Linux. Now in this video, I'm going to install it from scratch, and we're going to install it together with a window manager. I'm going to keep the system very light as possible, and installing less packages as possible. So without further ado, let's get started. So here we go guys, as I said in the intro, in this monthly install of Arch, I will take a little bit more time here on the base install, and I'm going to go through again line by line with the commands I'm using to install Arch, which are the commands actually that you find also on the Arch wiki. And we are going to install at the end maybe a window manager or a desktop environment, a very light version. I'm not going to install the whole Xorg display server, just a part of it to make the installation as light as possible. Now, of course, this is all personal preference, but feel free to adjust if you wish to do so. Now, you can see here I booted up my machine with the December 2021 ISO, and I have the standard prompt. So the first thing, I want to actually increase the font size so that you can see better. So let me type in set font. This is actually the command which is used to increase the font size here on the console. And you can see I have also a problem with the keyboard layout. I'm going to change this in a second. The command is set font ter132n. So this is basically going to set the font to the terminus font, and the size is 32 points. So once you hit enter, you will see the size increase and you can see better the fonts on the display. So as I mentioned before, the Arch ISO is actually booting up with the US keyboard layout. And if you don't have one, you will have to look for your keyboard layout. So how can you do this? Well, we can use a command which is called Locale CTL. It does have actually many functions, but the one we are looking for right now is to list the keymaps. So to use it, we can type in Locale CTL and then list dash keymaps. And you can see by using tab completion, it actually completes the command itself. So let's hit enter here. And you can see there is a long list of keyboards here. So you might say, oh, okay, I have to scroll through it and see where is mine. But we don't need to do this. We can hit Q here to get out. And we can pull up the last command here with the up arrow. And what we can do, we can pipe this command to a filter which is called grep. Actually, grep is not a filter, but we can consider it in this case a filter. And we are going to filter through the keymaps you're looking for. So I know, for example, my keyboard has a connotation of DE. This is for German, Deutsch. So I'm going to search for that. So I'm going to type in DE here and hit enter. And it's going to show you basically all the keyboard layouts which contains DE. The one I'm looking for has a connotation CH because that's a Swiss key. So I need to put in this into the system so that I can have my keyboard layout set in properly. So to do this, we can type in load keys and then the string I want. So DE underscore CH dash Latin 1 and then hit enter. And now I can use my keyboard here. I see I have my Y in the right place. So this is done. The second part is to look for our internet connection. So I have an Ethernet cable connected to my machine, so I can type in directly pacman-sy to check if the repositories are online, and indeed they are. Now, if you have a Wi-Fi connection, you will have to use the IWCTL utility, which is already included in the ISO. Now, before we do this, actually, let's type in IP space CA. Here you will have a list of your internet interfaces. So I have only one, as you see there, the number 2 is the interface, number 2 is the NP1S0. This is my Ethernet connection, and it has an IP ending with 221 there in purple. Now, if you have a Wi-Fi adapter in this list, you will see probably a third interface called WLAN 0 or something else, depends on your Wi-Fi adapter. So once we have this, we can type in IWCTL to configure our Wi-Fi adapter for Wi-Fi. So usually here you will have to type in station and then WLAN 0 is probably the name you're looking for, and then connect, and then the name of the Wi-Fi network you want to connect to. So for example, in my case, it would be EFTech5, and then when I hit enter, I would be asked for the passphrase. Once you enter the passphrase, you will be back to the IWD prompt there. Now, in my case, I don't have a Wi-Fi here, so I can just delete this command. Then once you're back in the IWD prompt, you can just hit Ctrl D, and you will go back to the ISO, and you can check again if you have an IP with IP-CA like we did before, and then you can pacman-sy to check if your repositories are online. So once we have internet up and running, we can type in lsblk to check our disk. So I have one disk in this machine. It's called VDA, as you can see there, and it's 50 gigabytes in space. So we need to perform here the partitioning, the formatting, and then the mounting before we can proceed installing the base system. So because this is a UEFI machine, I want to use the gdisk tool, which is meant to create GPT partition tables, which are actually the best partition tables for UEFI machines. So let me type in gdisk/dev/VDA and then hit enter. So the disk is empty and it's creating new GPT entries in memory, which is fine. So the first command we need to do here is to create a new partition, and we're going to do this by typing the N letter for new. The partition number by default is fine. We can accept this, so we can just hit enter. The first sector is also okay. We can just accept the defaults here. It's just going to start not at the beginning of the disk, but slightly after, which is good for me. And the last sector defines the size of the partition. Now for the UEFI partition, let's go with 300 megabytes of space. It could be also a little bit less. Some distributions require 512, but 300 usually is fine. And let me actually add a plus there, plus 300 megabytes, and hit enter. Now the code for the EFI partition is EF00. If you don't know the code, you can type in capital L here, and then you can search with a pattern. But I know it's EF00, so make your life easier here and just hit enter. And now we are done. So now we need to create the second partition. For this tutorial, I'm going to create a swap partition as well. So N for new. The partition number 2 is fine. The first sector is also fine here. And the last sector again defines the size. So I'm going to create here a 1 gigabyte swap partition. Now this is going to depend how much RAM you have on your machine. If you have a lot of RAM, like 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes, you don't need actually to make such a big swap. But if you have 1 gigabyte or 2 gigabytes, definitely create at least 2 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes of swap so that your system has enough swap space. And then we can hit enter. And the code for the swap is 8200. Again, if you don't know, you can search it. And the swap is now done. Now let's type in N for new to create our root partition. So partition number 3 is fine. First sector is also fine. And for the last sector, I'm going to create for the root partition 30 gigabytes of space. That should be plenty. Now Linux file system is fine here, so we can accept the default. And the root partition is now done. Now let's create the last partition, which is the home partition. So N for new. And here we are basically going to accept all the defaults because it's going to take the rest of the disk. The size and the file system are also okay by default here. And now we have our 4 partitions. We just need to write the changes to the disk by typing W and hit enter, and accept this by typing Y and hit enter. And you can see the operation has been completed successfully. That means if we type in again lsblk, we have our 4 partitions there, VDA 1, 2, 3, 4. So we partition the disk. Now we can format the partitions. So to do this, we need to use the mkfs command, which stands for make file system. And let's begin with VDA1, which is our EFI partition. So mkfs, the EFI partition has to be formatted with the FAT file system. So vfat/dev/VDA1, this is the partition path, and then hit enter. Next, the swap partition, VDA2. This time, instead of mkfs, we are going to use mkswap, which stands for make swap. So mkswap, and then we just define the partition path again. So /dev/VDA2 and hit enter. Now we created the swap, we need to activate it with swap on. again, partition path /dev/vda2 and hit enter. And this is now done. So now we can format our root partition. So let's type in again mkfs because we need to make a file system. I'm going to use ext4. The ext4 file system is pretty mature and pretty stable. And then the partition path /dev/vda3 and then hit enter. Now I'm going to repeat the same for the home partition. So I'm just going to pull up the last command here with the up arrow and replace VDA3 with VDA4. And the formatting is now done. So lsblk again, you will see there the swap partition is now defined there. We formatted also the other partitions, but we don't see the properties right now. We can mount now our partitions. So let's begin with VDA3 because it's our root partition where the system is going to be installed. So mount is the command /dev/vda3. So we are mounting our root partition into the installation directory, which is /mnt. And this is now ready. Now we need to mount also the other partitions, but before we do this, we need to create the directories in the new system for them to be mounted in. So to create the directories, we can use the mkdir command, which stands for make directory, and then -p to create multiple directories at the same time. Now we want to create the directories under /mnt because that's where the installation is going to be. And we have a boot partition and a home partition. So we need to create directories for both of these. So I'm going to open here the curly brace and create the boot/EFI partition, a comma, and also the home partition, and close the curly brace and then hit enter. This way I created boot/EFI and a home partition under the mount directory. So that means now we can mount VDA1 on boot EFI and VDA4 on home. So let's do this by typing in mount /dev/vda1, and we are going to mount this under /mnt/boot/EFI and then hit enter. And we can mount also VDA4 into home. So mount /dev/vda4 on /mnt/home and then hit enter. Now if I type in again lsblk, you will see we have our mount points there, which are correctly mounted. So that means we can now install the base packages. To do this, we need to use the packstrap command, and we're going to strap the packages, so to say, into the /mnt directory because that's where the installation is going to be. And the packages I want to install as a base system are the base package. We need to choose a kernel. In my case, I'm going to choose the Linux kernel, which is going to be the latest Linux kernel, which I believe is 5.15.5 at the time of this recording. We are going to install also Linux-firmware. Provide some more firmware for your computer. I'm going to install also Git and Vim because I'm going to need them anyway. And I'm going to install also for my processor the AMD-UCode package. Now, if you have an Intel processor, you can install, of course, Intel-UCode. For AMD processor, this is going to be your package. Then we can hit enter here and proceed with the installation of the base packages, which depending on your internet connection is going to take a couple of minutes. So I'm going to pause the video here, guys, and I'll be back with you once it's finished. So the installation is now done, as you can see, and we can now proceed to generate the file system table. So remember when we mounted our partitions before, let me actually type in lsblk here. So we mounted our partitions here on these mount points. So what we need to do, we need to tell the system to save these mount points into the fstab file, which was just installed with the base packages into the new system. And that's because when we reboot our machine afterwards, those mount points will be in place. If not, the system will not be able to boot. So to generate the file system table, we can use the gen fstab script, which is already available in the ISO. And we are going to use the UUID of the partitions, which are unique identifiers. That means even one day you will put in other disks in your machine, this UUID will never change. And the file system table will always know which device will have to be mounted where. And so we are going to take basically the mount points we have on /mnt. So these are the mount points we created before that you can see with the lsblk command. And we are going to basically put them into /mnt, so into our installation directory, in the etc directory, which was created now during our base packages installation, and the fstab file, which was installed also during the base packages installation. So now that the file system table is generated, we can go into the installation and proceed with the rest of the steps. So let's type in arch-root/mnt and then hit enter. And if I type in now cat/etc/fstab, you can see here our mount points. Now some people get confused here. Well, what we actually use /mnt/etc/fstab. Yes, but look at the previous command, arch-root/mnt. That means we went into the mnt directory. And when I use the cat command, I used it from that directory. So I am inside now the mnt directory because that's where the new system is going to be installed. And from there, I don't need to repeat the mnt directory because I am in it. So /etc/fstab, it's actually the file system table of my newly installed system. So now we can proceed with the rest of the steps for installing Arch. So the first one is to find out our time zone. For this, we have the timedate-ctl command, which has a lot of functions, but the one we are looking for is the time zones. So we can type in, if you don't know your time zone, we can type in timedate-ctl. You can use also tab completion here, it helps a lot. And then list-time zones. And then hit enter. Now again, we have a long list of time zones here, and you don't want to scroll through all of these. So let's quit out from here with the Q key and clean up the terminal with Control-N and pull up again the last command with the up arrow. And let's pipe this command again to the grep function, which we can use it as a filter right now. And let's see, for example, I know I'm in Europe, so I want to filter all the time zones in Europe. So I'm going to type in here Europe and then hit enter. Now you can see there we have a list of time zones in Europe, but I don't see all of these because the fonts are too big. So if you want to see also the top of the list, what we can do here, we can pull up again the last command and do another pipe to the less command, which is going to show you just the first part of the list basically. And you can see that we see now from A until M, and if you hit the enter key, you can scroll through the list here. Now I am in Switzerland, and the only time zone I can select here in Switzerland is the Europe-Zurich time zone, which is the last one in the list. Now I will hit Q here to get out and go back to the ISO. And the command there is going to be ln-sf. This is going to create a symbolic link from user share zone info. And then I'm going to define Europe and then Zurich, because that's my time zone. And I'm going to link this to /etc/local time, which is a file we're going to create right now, and then hit enter. So the time zone is now set, and we need to synchronize the hardware clock and the system clock. To do this, we can type in hwclock --sys2hc to system to hardware clock, and then hit enter. And this step is also done. Now we need to work on the locales. To do this, we have the locale.gen file, which was installed during the base installation of the base packages. So we need to edit that with the Vim editor or with your editor of your choice. So to do this, we need to type in vim /etc/locale.gen and then hit enter. So here you can see we have a long list of locales, so you need to decide basically which locale you want to use in your system. In my case, I want to use English, so I want to type in here the / in Vim and search for en_us because that's the language I want to use. And you can see it right there, it's highlighted, so I can hit enter there to go to that line and hit the I key to enter edit mode in Vim and delete the hashtag. So this is basically the locale I want to use in my system, so I can hit the escape key and then :X to save this file and exit Vim. And now I can run the command to generate the locales, which is locale-gen, and then hit enter. It's going to take a moment to generate the locales. You can of course select multiple locales if you want. You can select also 3 or 4 if you require that. It's really up to you. So now we have the locales in place. We need to set also the locale.com file. To do this, I'm going to use the echo command. The echo command is going to basically put everything what we are going to put afterwards, and in this case it's going to be the locale into the locale.com file. So the locale is going to be lang for language equal the locale we found before. So in my case it's en_us.utf-8, closing the quotes, and we are going to put this information under /etc/locale.conf and then hit enter. Now we are going to do also the same in my case with the vconsole.com file, and that's because I changed the keyboard layout of the console at the beginning of the video, if you remember. So I need to put this also in the vconsole.com file, otherwise if I don't, when I reboot the machine, the console is going to use again the English layout. So let's type in echo and then quotes again and then keymap equal. The keyboard layout I used at the beginning was de_ch-latin1, closing the quotes. You can of course replace this with your keyboard layout, and we are going to append this under /etc/vconsole.conf file. Now don't get confused here, this console file, this vconsole file is basically taking care of the keyboard layout only on the console, not on your desktop environment and not in the terminal in the desktop environment. If you're using a desktop environment afterwards or a window manager, you will have to set the keyboard layout in the window manager or desktop environment as well. This keyboard layout is going to work only if you boot into the console directly. Next, we need to create a hostname for our machine. So I'm going to use again the echo command, and I'm going to call my machine simply Arch. You can of course choose another name if you want. And I'm going to append this information to /etc/hostname and then hit enter. So next we need to work on the hosts file. To do this, I'm going to use this time the Vim editor. So vim/etc/host, that's where the file location is. And I'm going to go here at the end of the file and create a few new lines. The first one is the IPv4 address for the local machine, which is 127.0.0.1, hitting a tab key, and then the machine name is going to be localhost. And I'm going to do the same for the IPv6 address, which is ::1, and tab, and again localhost. This is again the same name for the machine. And the last line is going to be 127.0.1.1, a tab key again, and this is going to basically define the local domain. So it's going to be Arch, this is the host name for my machine, you'll need to replace it with yours, .local domain, a tab again, and then at the end again the host name, which is Arch. And that's it for the host file. So we can hit the escape here and then :X to save the file and exit Vim. And the next step would be to change the password for the root user. So pass wd, it's the command. You can select a new password and you will need to retype it. And the password for the root user is now set. Now let's install the packages we want to have in our system. So I'm going to install not that many in this tutorial because I want to install only really basic packages. I did also many other tutorials when I installed more packages. So if you want to see more packages, go ahead and check those videos out. So let's type in pacman-s. So the first packages I want to install are grub and the EFI boots mgr or EFI boot manager. That's because I don't want to use the system deboot in this video. I'm going to use also network manager and not systemd network D. I have another video for that, so if you are interested in that, you can check out that in the channel. I'm going to install also the network-manager-applet. This is the applet for the network manager. I'm not sure I'm going to use this, but if you're installing a desktop environment, chances are this is going to be needed anyway. I'm going to install also dialog and WPA supplicant, although I'm not sure that this is already a dependency of another package. That's why I'm going to install it anyway. I'm going to install also the base devil and Linux-headers packages. Now, these are two packages used for development, but chances are if you're using Arch, you're going to need them anyway, especially if you're installing something from the AUR or some more other packages from the main repository. So I recommend you to install them anyway. Now we could install, for example, also the xdg-utils, which is going to provide some xdg utilities for the system, and also xdg-user-dirs to create home directories if you need them. They're not mandatory, but they are nice to have. If you have Bluetooth adapters, definitely install Blues and Blues-utils. If you want to install, if you have a printer, definitely install Caps, the Caps printing system. I'm going to install also Pulse Audio. You can install Pipewire if you want, but in this video, I'm going to install probably a window manager, so Pulse Audio is fine for me. I'm going to install also ALSA-utils because I might need them for audio utilities later. And also Power Control, a very handy utility here for checking out your sound devices. And I'm going to install maybe just the Terminus font because that is not installed in the new installation. So we can just hit enter here and accept the defaults for the installation. So again, this depending on your internet connection is going to take some time. So I'm going to pause the video here and I'll be back with you once the installation is done. So the installation of the packages is now done, and what we need to do right now, we need to also install the grub bootloader because we installed the package, but we didn't install yet the bootloader. So to do this, we need to use the grub-install command, and we need to define the target. Now this is actually a UEFI machine, that's why I'm using the --target equal x86_64-EFI. And then we need to define also the directory for the EFI machine. So let's type in --EFI-directory equal. You remember the directory we selected at the beginning of the video when we actually mounted the mount point was /boot/EFI. And then we define the bootloader with --bootloader-id equal grub. Now this is going to work in most cases. In some cases you might have to add the recheck option, but I would definitely recommend you to check the Arch Wiki if you need to find out and if you need to troubleshoot if this command is not going to work. So then we can hit enter and let's see what happens here. Installing and installation finished, no error reported. So grub is now installed, but we need to generate the configuration file because that's not done automatically for us. So to do this, we need to type in grub-mkconfig. So make configuration basically of grub -o, so the output, because if we don't use the output switch here, it's just going to print out in the terminal here, the configuration file, but that's not going to be useful. We need to have it in the system. So the output is going to be under the /boot directory into the grub directory, and the file is going to be called grub.cfg, and then hit enter. And you can see that it's creating our images for the system. Now OS Prober here, you can see we have grub OS Prober is not enabled. That's fine in my case because I didn't install OS Prober. I have many videos on this also on the channel, so if you want to see how it's done, you can check those up as well. For example, the last month installation, I also changed this option as well. And I can proceed now to enable some of the systems that we installed before. So for example, Network Manager, the Bluetooth service, Caps, and everything else, we can enable them so that when they are enabled, the next time we boot the machine, they are going to be working. So let's begin by typing in the system, ctl enable. Let's begin with Network Manager. Now this service has to be with these capital letters, otherwise it will not find it. And then we can hit enter. Network Manager will make sure that our internet connection is up and running, or that our internet service is up and running when we reboot the machine. Next, we can pull up the last command with the up arrow and replace Network Manager with the next service we want to enable, which is the Bluetooth service. And then hit enter. We repeat this process again. This time we are going to select Caps, our printing system, because we want to have it available when we reboot the machine. So I think this is all I want right now. So I can proceed by creating a user for the system because I don't want to boot as a root user, and that's actually not best practice neither. So to create a new user, we can use the user add command. That's a standard command for creating new users here on the terminal. I'm going to use the -m switch, which is going to create also a home directory for the user. And now I can select the username I want, which is in my case, my name. And then I can hit enter. And now we have a user in the system. You can check this if you type in, for example, cat /etc/passwd and hit enter, you can see here the last line in this file, it's my new user. So this is one way you can check, for example, if a user is present in the system, it's to check the passwd file. Now I need to give also a password to this user, so I'm going to use again the passwd command we used before for the root user, but in this case I'm going to add the username I want to change the password for. So my name, and then enter a new password, and then retype it. And now my user has his own password as well. Now we are not yet done because I want to give actually this user sudo privileges because right now it does not have them. Now let me clean up the terminal. And if I type in ID hermano, you can see it has its own UID, which is default, and it belongs also to its own group, which is also default. But it does not belong to any other group. And if I want this user to have sudo privileges, it has to belong to the will group. Now, the will group is something that needs to be activated in the sudo file, which we need to do. So because I installed Vim and not V as an editor, if you install Nano, you'll have to process here also the same thing. We need to define the editor first. So to do this, we need to type in editor equal Vim, in my case, if you're using Nano, replace this, of course, and then sudo, and then hit enter. Now we need to scroll down here with Control F in Vim, and you can see there we have the root group, which is already active, and we have the will group here. Now we have two of these, and I definitely recommend you here to uncomment the first one. See the comment here, uncomment to allow member of the group will to execute any command, but they will have to enter the password in this group here. If you uncomment the second will group here, you can see there is an option here, no password. That means these users will not have to type in any password when they want to execute sudo commands. So not really safe. I'm going to go here with the will group, with the first one, and uncomment this line here, and then we can hit the escape key and then :X to save the file and exit Vim. So now we can actually give the will group also to my user. Well, actually not ID, but ID hermano here. And I want to give actually the will group to hermano. So to do this, I can type in user mod, which is the standard command that you would use to modify a user property. And then -G. So we are basically appending an extra group to this user. We are not going to replace the default group, because if you're not using the A switch, the append switch, you're basically going to replace the standard group with the will group that we are going to use right now. But I want the user to have two groups, its own group and the will group. So that's why we have the A option there, the A switch. And the group I want to add is will. And the user to whom I want to actually add this group is hermano. And then hit enter. Now again, if I use ID hermano, you can see under the groups there we have its own group and the will group. So I know when I will reboot the machine, my user will have sudo privileges. So this is basically done for the base install. So what we can do right now, we can type in exit, and we need to unmount all the partitions, especially the mount partitions. So umount -R on /mnt and then hit enter. And now we can type in reboot, and our machine will reboot hopefully into grub if everything went well. And here we have the grub bootloader. And I see I didn't set the resolution here. I should have done this before because it's on a virtual machine. If you are on metal, probably the resolution will be already displayed correctly, but in my case it's not. So let me go in here with the E key and go to the Linux line, which is defining the kernel, basically, the boot parameter of the kernel. And I'm going to add in here video equal 1920 per 1080. And then I'll boot my machine with Control X. I'm going to change this afterwards in the grub configuration file. And you can see we have our login prompt. So we can log in here with my username and the password. And because I installed the Terminus font, I can use again the set font ter-132n command to set the fonts. So let me clean up the terminal here. And the first thing we need to do is to check if we have an internet connection, if you have an IP. So let's type in IP space -C space A. to check again. I have an IP again because I'm connected here with the Ethernet cable. Now, if you have Wi-Fi, we installed Network Manager, and Network Manager has a very handy terminal utility called nmtui. So type this in the terminal if you want to use Wi-Fi, and then you go to activate a connection. Now here you will see a list of wired networks and a list of wireless networks if you have them. Now if you have one, you can just select it, and once you hit enter, you will be asked to enter your passphrase. And once you have done that, you will be having an IP as well. And then you can go back using the escape key here and go to quit and go back to your terminal. Now you can check again if you have an IP here with IP space -CA and make sure that the IP is there. And then we can check our repositories by typing in sudo pacman-sy and then hit enter. Now you will need to authenticate because it's a sudo command. And you can see I'm connecting fine, so you should be able also to refresh your repositories. So from here, we can just basically build our desktop environment or our window manager. Now in this video here, I'm going to basically install a window manager very quickly, i3, with the very basic packages. So I'm going to type in sudo pacman-s, and I want to actually install not the whole Xcore group here. I'm just going to need xorg-server and also xorg-xrender, and that's because I need to change then the resolutions of my display eventually. Then I'm going to use the i3 package and also the menu, the launcher. I'm going to install also LX appearance and also nitrogen for the wallpaper. I'm going to install also Arch Linux wallpapers for the wallpaper itself. Now for the file manager, this time I'm going to use Ranger, and I'm going to do actually a separate video on Ranger. Ranger is a file manager on the terminal, which is really nice. Browser, in my case, Firefox. Now I want to have also a display manager, so I'm going to install a LightDM here with its greeter, lightdm-gtk-greeter, and also hit settings. So LightDM -gtk-greeter-settings. And the last package I want to install is a Terminator, and then hit enter. Now I'm going to set i3 gaps here as a repository and accept the defaults also here and install now the packages. Now again, this is going to take a moment to install depending also on your internet connection. So I'm going to pause quickly the video here, guys, and I'll be back with you in a moment. So the installation is now done. So let me clean up the terminal with Ctrl-L. And the last step is we need to enable the display manager. So sudo systemctl enable lightdm and then hit enter. So now we can reboot the machine, and if everything went well, we should be greeted again by the grab bootloader, the display manager, and we should be able to boot into i3. So reboot. It's going to take a moment to do this. And here we have grab, so let's hit enter. And we should see LightDM here. There you go, LightDM is there. It's not configured, but that's fine. So let's enter the password and hit enter to create the config file. And I will accept here the default for the Win key as a mod key. And now we are in i3, as you can see. So let me open up the terminal with mod enter. Here we have Terminator. And you see Terminator is opening up fine. So I can type in free-h, and you can see there we are using 181 megabytes of RAM, which is awesome. Now, as I said before, when we define the vconsole.conf file, the layout of your keyboard is going to be defined only in the console if you boot into the console. But if you see right now here in i3, if I hit my Y key, the Z key comes, and that's because here the layout is not the same. Here is going to be back to the US layout. So we need to set this again in the configuration file, or you can set it also here in the terminal by using the set xkbmap command and then ch. This is the connotation of my keyboard. And now if I hit the Y key, I have Y typing on the terminal. So this is a very bare-bone installation of Arch that we did here. I hope what I explained here line by line helped you to understand the basic concepts of the installation. Actually, by installing Arch this way, you understand a lot of basic concepts of Linux, which are going to find also in many other distributions, like for example, creating users or formatting your disk. These are also tasks that you're going to find in certifications as well. So installing Arch from scratch, manually, line by line, it's definitely going to help to get a grasp of the basic concepts of Linux. Now, Linux can be much more complex, and it is much more complex if you go more in depth. But for the basic things, Arch Linux is really going to provide you a gym for your muscles on how to install Linux with the basic commands. So this was the installation of Arch using the December 2021 ISO. I went through again line by line. I hope you found it useful. And if you have any question, let me know in the comments below. I will try to answer you as soon as I can. And I also hope that you liked the video. If you did, please hit the thumbs up and subs to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. I'll see you very soon in the next one.